The moment the clock struck 9, the atmosphere inside the Delvion Dynamics conference hall shifted, not gradually, but sharply, like a blade slicing clean through silence. More than 40 employees filled the room, their murmurs dying instantly as the lights dimmed over the long marble table. Every face turned toward the entrance. Every breath seemed to pause. And then she walked in, Samantha Hale, file clutched to her chest, jaw steady, eyes determined. She didn't know it yet, but this morning would destroy her life, her dignity, and the last shred of belief she had in fairness. She also didn't know that this moment, this very humiliation, would become the exact reason her world turned upside down in ways she could never imagine. As Samantha approached the screen, the heavy thud of her heels echoed across the glossy floor. She placed her proposal gently on the table with both hands, unaware that this small gesture, this sign of hope, would soon be shattered cruelly. She took a slow breath, preparing to speak, but she didn't get the chance. Her boss, Victor Langford, rose from his chair with the slow, theatrical confidence of a man who believed he owned the world. Tall, sharp-featured, and always wearing that thin, predatory smirk, he stepped toward the center of the room, adjusting his cufflinks as though preparing for a show. And he was. His favorite show, public humiliation. Then, without a word of warning, he snatched Samantha's report off the table. The room froze. Samantha's pulse spiked. Victor lifted the pages high above his shoulder as if displaying a disgraceful artifact. His voice thundered through the hall, commanding absolute attention. "Everyone, take a good look at this." And then the first tear came. The paper ripped with a loud, vicious sound that cracked through the room like lightning splitting open a tree. It wasn't just a tear. It was a message, sharp and cruel. He ripped the report again and again, until the pages floated to the floor like torn pieces of a broken promise. The fragments landed at Samantha's feet. Her throat tightened. Her chest burned. Her vision shimmered, but she didn't cry. She stood perfectly still. Victor stepped closer, eyes burning with superiority. "This pathetic attempt at a proposal," he spat, letting the torn pieces scatter from his hands, "is the most embarrassing work I've seen in my entire career." A suffocating silence blanketed the room. Only Samantha's heartbeat continued, ragged and furious under her ribs. Victor didn't simply dislike her, he hated her. Samantha had been warned before. He targets the quiet ones, the ones who don't fight back. But she always believed that if she worked hard, stayed honest, and remained respectful, her effort would speak for itself. She was wrong. Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice, but making sure everyone heard every venomous word. "You don't belong here. You don't belong in this department. You don't even belong in this company." Murmurs spread. Someone gasped. A young intern looked away, unable to tolerate the cruelty. Victor extended his arm toward the door, palm open, voice hard and final. "You're fired, Samantha. Effective immediately. And I want everyone in this room to remember, this is what happens when someone overestimates their worth." The humiliation slammed into her like a blow to the chest. Her breath hitched, her fingers curled into trembling fists. But she didn't collapse. She didn't plead. She didn't let him see the crack forming inside her. Instead, she bent down slowly, picked up one torn page from the floor, and smoothed it with her thumb. The ink was smudged from Victor's touch. That alone felt like an insult. She straightened her back. With each step toward the exit, her heels clicked like the beating of war drums, even though she herself hadn't yet realized a war had begun. When she reached the door, someone whispered, "Victor will regret this." Someone else muttered, "The board already hates him." But their pity meant nothing. Pity was worthless. Samantha stepped into the hallway, the heavy door closing behind her like the end of a chapter she never wanted to write. Inside, the suffocation finally loosened. Her breath escaped in a shaky exhale she had been holding for far too long. She walked past desks, past co-workers who looked at her with sympathy-filled eyes but said nothing. What could they say? No one dared to challenge Victor. As she reached the elevator, her vision blurred for a brief moment. She blinked it away fiercely. She would not break. Not here. Not in front of people who would talk about her downfall during lunch. She rode the elevator down, staring at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Red eyes, a tightened jaw, a woman pushed to her limit. When the doors opened to the lobby, sunlight flooded in, warm and bright, in sharp contrast to the darkness she felt inside. The receptionist looked up, alarmed by her expression. "Samantha, what happened?" She forced the smallest smile. "I'm okay." It was a lie. But she walked out anyway. Rain sprinkled lightly over the sidewalk, soft and cold. She stood under the gray sky, letting the drops fall onto her cheek, masking the single tear that escaped without permission. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. Elian Ward, her childhood friend, her protector, her closest companion until life pulled them apart 10 years ago. The boy who used to say, "One day, Sam, I'll come back for you." Why was he calling now? Her fingers trembled as she answered. "Elian?" His voice came through, warm, confident, deeper than she remembered. "Sam, finally. I've been searching everywhere for your number. I've got incredible news. I'm landing today. I'm about to become the new CEO of a major company." Her breath caught. "Oh?" she whispered. "Yeah. Ever heard of a place called Delvion Dynamics?" Her lips parted. Her eyes widened. Her heart stopped. Because Delvion Dynamics was the exact company that had just fired her publicly. The exact place where Victor humiliated her. The exact stage of her downfall. Samantha stood there motionless, rain sliding down her face like cold fingers. Elian laughed gently on the other end, unaware of her silence. "Sam, I can't wait to see you. I'm taking over tomorrow." Samantha inhaled slowly, because fate had just shifted. This time, she wouldn't be the one breaking. This time, someone else would. The morning after the public humiliation felt heavier than the night before. Emily woke to an eerie stillness, the kind that settles after a storm, but before its damage becomes clear. Her small apartment, usually a place of quiet comfort, now felt like a box closing in on her. Sunlight seeped weakly through the blinds, illuminating the rumpled paperwork on her desk, job applications she once believed she didn't need yet. Her phone buzzed again and again with messages from coworkers, each variation of, "Are you okay?" reminding her of the spectacle Victor had made of her. She didn't respond to a single one. She couldn't. The memory of Victor's voice, loud, sharp, and dripping with condescension, was still lodged in her ears like a splinter she couldn't pull out. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her trembling hands. She kept replaying the scene in her mind, trying to understand what she had done that deserved such public disgrace. She had worked late nights, fixed Victor's mistakes, handled every crisis he ran from, and kept the department from collapsing under his incompetence. But none of that mattered. The moment he saw an opportunity to shift blame, he seized it and sacrificed her like she was disposable. Emily took a deep breath, but it wavered on the way out. She wasn't just angry. She felt betrayed by a system she gave everything to. Her thoughts drifted to the upcoming CEO transition. The former CEO, Daniel Warwick, had retired unexpectedly, leaving the company buzzing with rumors. The new CEO was supposed to arrive in a week, and no one knew anything about him except his reputation for turning dying companies into giants. Emily wondered if things would have been different had she lasted long enough to meet him. Maybe he would have seen her value instantly. Maybe he would have protected her. But those maybes only made her chest tighten because she knew the truth. People like her never got lucky. She stood up and splashed cold water on her face, telling herself she didn't need anyone to rescue her. But another truth lingered quietly inside her. She was exhausted, bone-deep exhausted. Months of overworking, endless criticism, and pretending everything was fine had slowly drained the spark she once carried. With pride, Emily used to enter the office with ambition in her eyes. Now she walked like someone who had been running uphill for too long. Even as she tried to muster courage, her reflection in the mirror betrayed her. Red eyes, dull expression, and a forced smile that cracked as soon as it formed. The girl who used to dream about promotions and new projects was nowhere to be found. Instead of wallowing, Emily forced herself to get dressed. She pulled on a simple blouse, tied her hair back, and stepped outside for a walk, hoping the fresh air would steady her mind. The city was loud and alive, the opposite of how she felt inside. Taxi horns, people rushing by, shopkeepers calling out. Life carried on, indifferent to her pain. She passed a coffee shop she used to visit every morning before work. Today she stood outside the window, staring at the people inside chatting, typing on laptops, and sipping their coffee with purpose. She once belonged to that world of routine and direction. Now she felt like she was floating without a map. Her stomach churned as she imagined going back to her office to collect her belongings. The thought of facing the same coworkers who had witnessed her humiliation made her throat tighten. Would they pity her? Would they whisper when she turned away? Would Victor smirk again if he saw her walk in defeated? The idea alone made her skin crawl, but she couldn't avoid it forever. She had plants on her desk she cared for, notes she needed, and personal things she didn't want anyone touching. So she turned around and began the long walk toward the corporate building she once entered with pride. When she finally reached the towering glass structure, her breath caught. The building seemed colder, taller, and more intimidating than ever before. The revolving doors spun slowly like a clock, ticking toward her next moment of dread. Emily hesitated at the entrance, pressing her hand against the steel frame. She remembered the first day she worked there, how excited she was, how she believed this job was her big break. That memory hurt now. She wiped her palms on her clothes and forced herself forward, stepping inside as if walking into an old battlefield still carrying the ashes of yesterday's war. The lobby felt too bright, too sterile. She walked quickly toward the elevator, praying no one would recognize her. But luck wasn't on her side. A few employees glanced in her direction and immediately began whispering. One woman tried to give her a sympathetic smile. Emily ignored it, pretending she didn't see. When the elevator dinged open, she stepped inside alone, letting the quiet hum ease her nerves. Floor 14. Her floor. The place where all her hard work, long nights, and loyalty meant nothing in the end. When the doors slid open, the familiar hallway stretched before her. But today, it felt foreign, like stepping into a past she no longer wanted. As she walked toward her desk, her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it echo in her ears. She noticed her coworkers peeking from behind their monitors, pretending to be busy whenever she got too close. Her desk was exactly as she left it. Tidy, organized, efficient. She reached for her plant first, gently lifting it as if it were the only friend she had left in the building. Just then, she heard the unmistakable footsteps of Victor approaching, heavy, confident, arrogant. She closed her eyes. She wasn't ready for another confrontation. But when she turned around, she saw something that made her breath hitch. Victor wasn't alone. The HR director walked beside him, holding a stack of papers, and behind them, a tall man in a charcoal suit, unfamiliar, but oddly familiar at the same time. Her pulse stopped. She didn't know why, but something about him made the air shift, and she had no idea her entire world was about to change. Emily's breath faltered as the man in the charcoal suit stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking softly against the office floor. He wasn't part of HR. That much she knew instantly. He carried himself with a quiet authority that made the air feel heavier, like a presence that shifted gravity without trying. His face was partially shadowed by the hallway light, but the jawline, the posture, the steady eyes, it all tugged at a part of her memory she hadn't visited in years. She blinked, trying to focus, but anxiety blurred her vision. The worst part was Victor's smirk. He looked far too proud, as if he were about to parade her failure in front of yet another stranger. She braced herself, gripping the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles whitened. Victor cleared his throat loudly, his voice carrying that same arrogance he always used when performing for an audience. "Emily," he said sharply, "since you're here, we might as well finish up the paperwork for your exit." The HR director gave a disapproving look but didn't intervene. They both seemed unaware of how Emily's gaze had locked onto the suited man instead. Her mind raced through 1,000 names, 1,000 faces, searching for a match that shouldn't exist in this building. The man's eyes swept the floor once before settling on her, and something inside her chest trembled. Those eyes, dark brown, observant, almost familiar in a way that felt impossible. The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with an unreadable expression. The longer he looked, the more her confusion grew into disbelief. No, it couldn't be. Not here. Not in this cold corporate tower miles away from the small neighborhood where she grew up. But fate had a strange way of arranging reunions. Messy, dramatic, and always at the moment when someone least expected them. Before she could say a word, Victor stepped in front of her line of sight, blocking her view with his broad frame. "As I was saying," Victor continued, "HR needs your signature on the termination documents. It's a simple process. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Emily felt something snap inside her. Not anger, not sadness, but an instinct she had forgotten she had, the instinct to defend herself. Just as she parted her lips to speak, the man in the charcoal suit stepped forward again, this time stopping directly beside Victor. His presence interrupted the conversation like a silent thunderclap. The HR director stiffened. Victor's smirk weakened, just a little. Emily watched as the suited man raised a single brow, amused, unbothered, and entirely in control. "Is this the employee you mentioned?" he asked calmly, his voice deep and smooth, dangerously familiar. Victor swallowed nervously and nodded. "Yes, sir. Emily Clark, underperforming, negligent, failed to meet deadlines. I had to let her go yesterday for the good of the department." Each lie felt like a slap, but Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because now she knew. That voice, that tone, it was him. It had to be him. The suited man turned to look at her again, but this time the intensity in his gaze softened, only for a second, but it was enough. Her heart thudded painfully. Memories flashed in her mind. Two kids racing down an empty street, laughter echoing through summer air. A boy handing her half of his sandwich because she forgot her lunch. A boy with those exact same eyes. "Liam?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Victor blinked, confused. HR frowned, but the man's lips curved into the smallest, faintest smile, a smile that cracked the years separating them. "Hello, Emily," he said quietly, the familiarity sliding into his voice like a secret shared only between the two of them. The moment hung in the air like a suspended drop of water, seconds from falling. Victor looked between them, startled. "You know her?" he asked, his tone shifting from confidence to panic. Liam didn't answer him. He didn't even look at him. Instead, he moved closer to Emily, his expression shifting from calm to something sharper, protective, maybe even angry. "I haven't seen you in years," he said softly, ignoring the growing tension in the room. "And this is the first thing I walk into?" His jaw tightened as if he were trying to contain something fierce. Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely holding together. "I didn't know you were—" She paused, the realization dawning on her fully. "You're the new CEO?" Victor's face drained of color. HR's shoulders tensed. Liam didn't deny it. He didn't need to. The authority he carried, the way everyone else subtly reacted to him, it all confirmed the truth. "Yes," he said simply. Then, turning his attention to Victor for the first time, his expression darkened. "And I'd like to understand why one of your employees was fired publicly, in front of an entire staff." His voice was controlled, but there was an undercurrent of anger so cold it made Victor visibly flinch. Victor stammered immediately. "Sir, I was just handling a performance issue. Nothing serious. She made several mistakes." "Did she?" Liam interrupted sharply. "Or did you?" The room went silent, completely silent. Emily felt her pulse hammering against her ribs as Liam stepped past Victor and stopped directly in front of her. He lowered his voice when he spoke again, but the words were heavy enough to shake the walls. "You don't deserve to be spoken to that way," he said. "Not yesterday. Not today. Not ever." She felt her throat tighten. No one had defended her like this in years. He glanced at her half-packed items, then at her trembling hands, and the anger in his eyes deepened. Without another word, he turned around and faced HR. "Put her termination on hold, immediately." HR nodded so quickly it was almost clumsy. Victor's mouth fell open. Emily stood frozen, overwhelmed and speechless, as the reality of what was happening settled over her like a warm but disorienting wave. Liam, her childhood friend, the boy she thought she would never see again, was now the most powerful person in the company, and he had walked in at the exact moment she needed someone the most. Victor stood pale and sweating, his authority crumbling right in front of the entire department. Emily didn't know what this meant for her future yet, but she knew one thing for certain. Everything in her life had just shifted, dramatically, irreversibly, and this was only the beginning. The atmosphere in the department shifted so sharply that even the air felt different, tense, electrified, and brimming with something no one could quite name. Emily stood rooted to the floor, her heartbeat pounding in her ears as Liam turned his full attention toward Victor. The arrogance that had once wrapped itself around Victor like armor had vanished completely, replaced by a trembling uncertainty. Employees began to peek over their monitors, sensing a storm building quietly in the room. Liam's expression remained calm, but his eyes were cold, so cold that even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to falter under his gaze. "I want a meeting with your entire management team," Liam said, each word sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Today, in my office." Victor gulped, nodding stiffly, his hands visibly shaking. Emily had seen Victor intimidate dozens of people, but she had never seen him look afraid until now. As HR hurried to follow Liam's instructions, Liam turned back to Emily, his expression softening instantly. "Come with me," he said gently, as though she were the only person in the room that mattered. Emily hesitated, glancing around the office. A dozen pairs of eyes darted away, pretending not to stare. She swallowed hard, embarrassed and overwhelmed, but Liam stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't have to stay here another minute." Something in his tone, warm, familiar, protective, gave her the courage to nod. She picked up her plant, gathered her scattered belongings, and followed him toward the elevator. The hallway felt impossibly long, each step echoing like a reminder of everything she had endured. But this time, she wasn't walking alone. When the elevator doors closed, sealing them in a quiet metallic cocoon, Emily finally exhaled, unaware that she had been holding her breath since the moment he appeared. Inside the elevator, Liam studied her face with a mix of concern and anger, the kind of anger reserved only for people who have been hurt unjustly. "I'm sorry," he said unexpectedly. "I never thought our first reunion would happen like this." Emily shook her head, trying to clear the fog in her thought. She hadn't processed the shock, the humiliation, or even the relief of seeing him again. How long have you been back?" she asked softly. "A month," he replied. "I've been reviewing the company quietly before stepping in." She frowned. "And you never reached out?" A small smile tugged at his lips. "I wanted the right moment." She let out a soft scoff. "This wasn't exactly it." Liam shrugged lightly. "Fate thinks differently." The elevator chimed and the doors slid open to the executive floor. Sleek, quiet, and intimidating. Emily felt out of place instantly, but Liam's reassuring presence anchored her. Liam guided her into his temporary office, still being set up but already exuding authority. Floor-to-ceiling windows washed the room in natural light, and a polished wooden desk stood near the center like a command throne. Emily placed her things carefully on a side table, feeling oddly small in the large space. Liam leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his gaze steady. "Tell me everything," he said. The seriousness in his voice made her pause. She looked down at her hands, picking at her fingers as she spoke. She told him about the hostility, the late hours, the impossible deadlines, and how Victor constantly blamed her for mistakes she didn't make. She recounted the public firing, her voice cracking despite her attempt to stay strong. Liam's jaw tightened more with each sentence, his irritation simmering beneath the surface like a quiet threat. When she finished, he exhaled slowly, as though trying to control a storm inside him. "I should have been here sooner," Liam said, a rare regret coloring his usually steady voice. Emily shook her head. "You had no way of knowing." He pushed off the desk, pacing slowly. "What he did wasn't just unprofessional, it was unethical and illegal." Emily blinked, startled. She had known it was wrong, but hearing it framed in legal terms made everything feel heavier. "I don't want trouble," she murmured, instinctively protective of her already fragile dignity. Liam turned sharply. "You didn't cause anything. You were abused by someone in power." His voice held an edge she had never heard from him as a child. The boy she once knew had always been kind, patient, almost gentle. But the man standing before her now was different. Still kind, still familiar, but sharpened by experience, authority, and the weight of leadership. There was a knock at the door. Liam didn't answer immediately. His expression darkened as he said, "Let them wait." Emily stared at him. "You don't have to—" He cut her off. "Emily, I meant what I said. You are not leaving this company. Not because of him. Not because of lies." She felt something warm settle in her chest, something she hadn't felt in months. Reassurance. "But what if they don't want me back?" Liam actually laughed, a short but genuine sound. "I'm the CEO. I decide who stays and who doesn't." She smiled despite herself. For the first time since yesterday, she felt the tightness in her chest loosen. Liam walked closer, lowering his voice. "I know your work ethic. Even back then, you were always the one helping everyone else finish their assignments." She looked up at him, startled. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," he replied, and the sincerity in his voice made her stomach flutter. The knock came again, louder this time. Liam straightened, his expression transforming into one of authority as he opened the door. The department's managers, including Victor, stood nervously in the hallway. "Come in," Liam said, stepping aside. They entered hesitantly, each person sensing the gravity of the moment. Victor avoided Emily's gaze entirely. Liam took his place behind the desk, his posture immaculate, his presence commanding. "Before we discuss anything else," he began, "I want to address what happened yesterday." Victor visibly tensed. The other managers exchanged concerned glances. Emily stood to the side, clutching her plant, unsure if she should stay. But Liam gestured subtly, signaling her to remain. This was her moment too. "What I witnessed," Liam continued, "was a clear breach of policy, ethics, and basic human decency." His voice was calm, but carried a blade-like sharpness. "Publicly terminating an employee is forbidden in this company. Public humiliation is harassment, and misrepresenting performance records is grounds for disciplinary action." Victor tried to interrupt, but Liam raised a hand. "Not another word." Victor fell silent instantly. "I reviewed Emily's work logs last night," Liam said coolly. "Every single deadline she supposedly missed was due to tasks you reassigned to her last minute, tasks outside her role." Gasps rippled quietly across the room. Victor's face flushed red with panic. Liam's gaze hardened. "Effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation." Victor opened his mouth, but the HR director, now emboldened, stepped beside Liam. "Hand over your access card," she said, and with trembling fingers, Victor did. As security escorted Victor out, Emily watched in stunned silence. The man who once towered over her confidence had crumbled within minutes. The office felt brighter, lighter, like the first breath after a long winter. Liam turned to Emily once the room emptied. "Your position remains secure," he said softly. "But more than that, I want to offer you something else." She blinked, confused. Liam stepped closer, his expression warm. "I need someone I can trust, someone competent, someone who isn't afraid to tell me the truth." He paused. "I want you to be my executive assistant." The words hit her like a gust of wind. Unexpected, overwhelming, life-changing. Emily felt her eyes sting. "Why me?" she whispered. Liam smiled, a small, nostalgic smile. "Because you've always been exceptional. You were just stuck under the wrong person." She looked down, tears slipping silently onto her fingers. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, valued, chosen. Emily lifted her gaze slowly, finding Liam watching her with a quiet sincerity that made her heart twist. "You don't have to answer right now," he added gently, "but I want you to think about it." She nodded, struggling to find her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. Liam stepped closer, almost close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. "Emily," he said softly, "you deserve better long before today. I'm just making sure you get it." A trembling breath escaped her lips. She wasn't the same woman who walked into the office trembling and ashamed. Something inside her had shifted. Strength returning, confidence stirring, and a new beginning forming right in front of her. As she stood there, in the office of the boy who once shared half his sandwich with her, she realized something profound. Life had taken everything from her just to return her to someone who had always seen her worth. And this, right here, right now, was the moment everything finally changed.